This is your host, Tia. This is your host, Tia. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Top 10. Live. Geek Vibes Nation. Geek Vibes Nation. Nation. The Top 10. The Top 10. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another awesome episode of the Top 10 by Geek Vibes Nation. As always, I'm your host, Tia, and I have with me my amazing co-host, Brittany. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Just still singing the top 10. Like, as soon as it starts, I hear it in my nightmares. No, I'm joking. My sweet dream.
I was going to say that when I say the Top 10 by Geek Vibes Nation, in my head, the Geek Vibes Nation is coming out as if Joanna's saying it. I don't know why.
Geek Vibes Nation, absolutely.
Oh my God, every time now I say absolutely, you point it out, and I'm like, oh, I could never use this word again.
No. He's going to hear one day and be like, y'all are fired. I don't want anything to do with y'all.
It might happen, so let's just say it as much as possible while we're on air.
I know. Yeah. We got to do it.
We got to do it. But, yeah, we're here for another Top 10. For those who don't know, it's spring ahead, so you might want to check your clocks, even though I feel like it was more of a big deal back in the day before, like, really you had, say, cell phones, because it's like, oh, my God, I have to change every clock in my life and remember that the time has changed. But pretty much everything's digital and just changes on its own. You wake up and you look at your phone and you're like, oh, all right, that's the correct time. I don't have to do anything. The only thing I had to do is change my microwave clock, and that was about it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's like I had to change my alarm clock because I could sleep through the apocalypse. But I was gonna say I'm excited about having extra daylight because on Sundays when I work, it's always like pitch black by the time I get home, and I feel like, oh, I didn't even get a day. So I'm excited to have more daylight when I get off work.
I'm excited for more daylight, and obviously now this is going to be the start of the spring, and then we'll get to the summer, and I'm just really looking forward to being in the pool again. But I almost am a little disappointed to hear that it's spring, just because I was really holding out for, a snowstorm. We had literally in New York one snow that was barely a snow. It was a dusting, and that was it. And it's crazy compared to, say, last year when there was 3 massive snowstorms. And I don't know, I was just holding out hope that we'd have at least one. Even though it's a slight inconvenience, I like the snow, and it just, I don't know, makes me feel good. And it's a little disconcerting, the fact that we had pretty much no snow. I'm like, oh, here you go, global warming. It's really coming. We had no snow in New York.
I was going to say, it was fairly a mild winter here, and at first I was like, well, maybe I just am used to it because, I worked outside in Kansas during last winter, and that was freaking miserable. So I was thinking back to, this winter, I was like, man, it's really mild. But when I thought about it, I think our coldest day in Arkansas was 20 degrees, which isn't even that bad. And we didn't even get I think we got one day where we got 5 seconds of flurries, and that's the most we got.
Yeah, I want to say it was the same thing. It got down to say 10 degrees at some point, but that was for one day or so. When I was a kid, all of winter was 10-degree days, so it's just very strange. But here we are, springtime is upon us. Happy International Women's Day as well. Brittany and I are obviously
I didn't know that was
women.
today.
Yeah, it's today. I feel a little like I've slacked because I was planning on doing this article where it was the best female-led movies, and it's still just in draft form because I've barely worked on it. But Kelly one of our contributors at Geek Vibes, is a team player, and she did the best female-led TV shows, and that's an actual article. It's up on our site, and just check it out because women power, you know what I'm saying? But that is not the topic of our top 10. Our top 10 is the top 10 movies based on real life or real life events. I didn't know like really how to word that. I was just like, yeah, whatever.
No, I get you.
It's crazy because there's a lot of movies that come out and they're not, say, like necessarily promoted as being like autobiographies or being based on real events, but then you'll look at, say, the Wikipedia and they're like, this movie drew inspiration from the real life events or based on this real life event. So there's a lot out there, and I was looking through my list, and a lot of them are favorites of mine, so I thought that this would be a really good topic to kind of go through this Sunday. What did you say?
No, I love it. I was sitting there, too, and there was a couple of movies when I was looking through that I was like, that was based on real events? What? And so I had that moment, too, where I was like, man, I was like, for a second, I was like, do I know that many movies? Well, while I got looking, I was like, oh, okay.
I would probably say that my list alone is like over 10 movies, so I'm like, I'm good. I feel like we're not going to have any overlap because I have a lot of spares, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that we should probably just hop right into it, but before I do, I like to now kind of say a message from a friend of the podcast. As I say all the time, I'm obsessed with this podcast. They call this a movie, and the gentlemen who do that podcast also do a D&D podcast called Stranger Damies. So they were kind enough. First of all, they've been plugging our show every episode, which is really nice. So I want to plug their show, and the host there, Anthony Del Vecchio, wrote me a nice little excerpt to say because I have no idea about D&D. So I was like, you need to put something together for me to, plug. So Stranger Damies is the ongoing real play D&D podcast from the main Damie family of podcasts. Join them every Wednesday as the Wild Stallions traverse the many traps and tribulations that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has to throw in their path. There's elves, weird half-dragon people, conspiracy to uncover, and more references to the 1980s and Ready Player One. Subscribe to the podcast on all podcast services by searching Stranger Damies and follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Stranger Damies. And Stranger Damies is also a proud member of Geek Vibes Nation, and you can, of course, find us at geekvibesnation.com. So if you are into D&D like Brittany is, please make sure that you check out their Stranger Damies every Wednesday.
I'm going to say D&D is a wild ride, so I think it would definitely be something to check out.
It's funny because, their team, I guess, is called Wild Stallions, but they put Y's in them, so it's like WYLDSTALLYNS. I'm like, I see what you did there.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'm smelling what you're stepping in.
That's terrible.
I know, that one's always the worst.
Well, just like you. No, I'm joking.
Whoa. Speaking of the worst, I was talking to you, and I was like, ready for the podcast. Toby my cat. He has not left me alone since I came home from that trip, and I got a swift little claw right across the nose, him trying to love on me, and I was like, oh, this love hurts, just like Tia's love.
Wow. I have to send you this video that explores why some cats are so clingy, because as you know, our orange cat, Sunny, is the clingiest, and it's something like they don't, first of all, you're an object of comfort, but they don't perceive you as, having anything else important to do in your life other than just being there for them to, cling on to. And I'm like, that's pretty correct.
I was, you know what? I could believe that because I will be streaming and suddenly Toby's like right in the middle of the screen. His claws are trying to go into the mic. He's like on my lap. He's like kneading on my knee, but his claws are going inside my knee, and I'm like, do you not understand what Mom is doing here right now, buddy?
It's funny because everyone thinks that cats are so antisocial and they aren't loving and they don't show you affection. And I challenge any of those people to come to my house and see how utterly freaking attached Sunny is. It's just like,
oh my gosh. I would say, having met Sunny and seeing, like, I think that cat loves Polly more than you do.
I mean, that cat definitely like would die if something happened to Polly. He
would sell your soul for a corn chip.
He'd be like, man, I'm stuck with you. Holy shit! But yeah, so that's my little spiel about cats right now. Let's get into this top 10, and always you're going to start us off. What is your number 10?
I'm going to start out small, but like one of my favorite movies. It is a movie that I have watched on repeat 1,010,000 times. I used to watch it like 5 times a day, just let it go on repeat.
I'm already writing it down because I know what it is.
Which I forgot it was based on a real story. I'm gonna go on Lawless with Shia LaBeouf. We had Tom Hardy. I can't remember the other brother's name. He doesn't matter. No, I'm joking. Yes, and Guy Pearce was in it. The story of the wettest county, and I try to remember the full title to that. But apparently, Lawless is about during the Prohibition, you have 3 brothers dealing in moonshine down in the South and making quite the profit from it. They're kind of rough and rowdy. And, special agent, I can't remember his name, but he's played by Guy Pearce, comes in. Yes, and he is coming down as a corrupt lawman that's going to put a stop to it or, get his own fingers in the pie. And apparently the book, it was a book first, which was written by the great-nephew of the brothers. I don't know which brother he came from. I think he came from the youngest, played by Shia LaBeouf. And it's just like, it was interesting because I had watched that movie so many times, and when I was going through, I had totally forgotten that it was written by the great-nephew, and I was like, that movie is so wild, the brothers are so rough and tumble, but it makes sense, especially from being from the South and the moonshine business. That's why it became very interesting when they started selling moonshine in liquor stores. And all the people in the South were like, oh, this ain't real moonshine. This is only what proof? Oh, real moonshine is can make you go blind, basically, if it gets in your eyes. But I looking back on that, I was like, I know they definitely took some liberties with it. But knowing, the Prohibition was very much real, very much still alive in Arkansas. I live in a dry county, and as Tia knows, I remember when you first came to Arkansas and we went to Searcy, which is a big religious town because of their college is a religious college. And we were at Chili's, and you're like, man, I'd like to get a drink. And I'm like, oh, it's a dry county. And you're like, what the fuck is a dry county? Are you living in the Prohibition over here? So
I literally didn't think that was still a thing. I was like, the Prohibition ended in the fucking 30s. What are you talking about that there's still places in America? Like, that blew my mind.
I know. When I was streaming the other day and I talked about something like, oh, I had to drive like an hour away to get liquor, they were like, well, what the hell? Did you really like that liquor store? And I'm like, no, I live in a dry county. And so many of them are from Europe, my viewers, and they were like, what the hell is a tri-county? I was like, the worst. It is quite the hassle, but it was interesting that, getting to see it from that point of view. And as we saw, the Prohibition did not end up, we had speakeasies. They were, I think, Winston Churchill around that time. You could actually be prescribed alcohol, and he had, basically a doctor's note that said he could have as much alcohol as he wanted. But it's so interesting. That whole movie is so great because, obviously, as I said, it's an exaggeration, but getting to see the rough and tumble lifestyle and how the moonshine business could be was definitely, interesting, how they had to hide their distilleries, how much, money went into it. Because Charles Riggs didn't care because, he just had that sense of justice. No, he was a dirty cop. He's from Chicago. So you could definitely, it was interesting, too, to see, well, we're Southern and you're just like a Yankee. And I'm like, yep, that sounds very accurate for the time.
I love Lawless. So it's based on the book called The Wettest County in the World, and it's written by Matt Bondurant, who his grandfather was Jack, and Jack was the character played by Shia LaBeouf, which I do attribute this movie being the first movie that I actually liked Shia LaBeouf in, because prior to that it was the Transformers movies and I couldn't stand him in those movies. But Lawless is just so great. I think some of the historical inaccuracies come from, say, the fact that the real Forrest Bondurant was thin and sickly, and Tom Hardy was beefed up from playing Bane in The Dark Knight Rises.
He just came back from Bane.
So there's that. But I read some of the autobiography. I didn't finish it, but they did touch upon a lot of the things that happened, say, in the movies, and some things that we didn't see, apparently. And you can probably say, he was writing this about his grandfather, right, and writing it about his great uncles. So it's a lot of it also is, say, folklore, but, Forrest Bondurant was once, trampled by a bunch of logs, and in the book it does talk about him getting his throat split. So, but, and because it's International Women's Day, we have to acknowledge Jessica Chastain's Maggie, who truly was the heart of the movie.
So good. So good.
She certainly had Forrest's heart, but she even says at some point, you're so damn, stupid that you believe your own myth, pretty much, because
yes, his own lore.
Yeah, because, he was like, I thought I walked to the hospital. And she's like, you dumb fuck. I drove you to the hospital. What makes you think that you could have walked to the hospital with holding your throat pretty much together?
Right.
That whole movie was so amazing. First of all, the soundtrack. I loved the soundtrack of that film. I love the way that it was shot, getting to kind of see the different perspectives. And one of the things, I guess, in the book, they never went over the fact that, say, Howard was married at the time.
I know, and that she, lived up in the hills, and that he just come and visit her.
Yeah, but I guess they were just kind of that's too much to pack into one movie. But there are so many great, scenes. One of the best scenes ever is freaking Forrest just sitting up on his deck, and he's just drinking some coffee as those lawmen come, and they're like, where's your brother, blah, 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 and he's like, have you met Howard? And Howard just barrels through and oh my God, it's so good. I knew you were going to put this on there. I had it on my list. I'm I'm not even going to say anything because I know that she's going to put it out. And I'm not disappointed by the fact that it's the number 10 here.
Right. I sat back and I was like, man, I know it's one of my favorite movies, but I was like, there is better ones that deserved to be higher that I'm sure we'll get to. But I was like, I'll go ahead and start it easy.
I enjoy it. I love it. Lawless is certainly one of those movies that I feel like is underrated now. I feel like at the time when people were just getting into Tom Hardy, right?
Yeah, because of Bane.
Right. So when this came out, it's like people ate it up, but now it's like Tom Hardy is so well known that this movie's kind of removed. But this movie also, Jessica Chastain, she attributes this movie to really kicking off her career, because she's like, I've tried for years, because Jessica Chastain was, I think, like 30-something in this movie, right? Like maybe 32 or even 35. But my whole point is, she's like, I've been trying to get that break for years in Hollywood, and this is finally it. So Lawless is definitely a great movie. I love reading up on the lore of it, and I love that it's the number 10. So awesome. I'm going to hit the number 9, and I'm going to put this a little, lower as well, even though it's a fantastic movie. But it's just, as you said, there's others that I want to put above it. But I feel like this movie is one of those movies that isn't the typical, what would you say, a typical, like, biography pretty much. And it's The Wolf of Wall Street, because I didn't realize that this was, like, based on a true story at first, right? It's so crazy and so, extravagant and everything that you're like, this has to be made up. But The Wolf of Wall Street by Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, is based on a real, person who really was in that position of the movie. So to me, it's so wild, because it's not really told like, say, a real life tale, because it's so crazy, and you just think, this is something
exaggerated.
So exaggerated. Thank you. That's what I was trying to think of. But it's so exaggerated that you're like, no way is something like this real. But no, Jordan Belfort, who Leonardo DiCaprio played, really existed, and it's insane. Like, you have Leonardo, and everyone says this, and I have to agree with them, that Leo should have won the Oscar for this performance, because he was so good in it, because he's so crazy. I mean, you got this character that's literally, he starts off the movie pretty much by telling you, like, all right, so I take Xanax in the morning, and then I take this, and then I take that, and then I'm on Quaaludes, and then I'm drinking 24/7. It's like, how are you alive?
Quaaludes definitely ages it.
Yeah, because it doesn't even exist anymore, so you can see, like, it's 80s, and you have Leo in it, and Margot Robbie is in it, and they're just great at it. There's just so many good performances, and of course we have to mention that Jon Bernthal is in it, playing, like, the most exaggerated, like, caricature ever as Brad. And it's just,
he is one of my favorite characters he's done. I will not lie, though.
And I won't lie either. It's one of the best, because I just love, like, the pencil scene where, like, none of the other people are getting it, but Brad gets why, like, how to sell him that pencil, but or pen or whatever. But I have to say really quick before I go further, so you watched it with me, right? Like, I feel like we watched it together.
Yeah, we watched it together last time. Not last time I was in New York, but the time before last.
So there's that scene where at first you think Jordan Belfort is going to retire because of the legal issues that they're in, but then he's, like, sitting there talking to his company. He's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not fucking going anywhere. And so during the summer, when the whole Sony and Disney thing happened, and it's like, oh my God, Tom Holland's not going to be Spider-Man in the MCU anymore, right? But then they finally came to an agreement. Tom Holland posted that on Instagram to announce to people that he was still.
Yes.
Like, that's just so great. I'm not going anywhere. I'm fucking not going anywhere. But yeah, movie is really intense and it is exaggerated and pretty much like a nonstop party because they're just like screwing hookers constantly. They're doing all sorts of drugs. They're on like, yachts and everything. But before I pass it on to you, I have to kind of highlight one of the scenes that I was thinking about the other day because I'm like, fun as that movie was, there is one like absolutely heart-pounding scene that I really was like on the edge of my seat watching, and it's the scene where towards the end where Margot Robbie's character tells Leo's character that she's leaving him, and he's so hopped up on shit that he's like running to get their daughter. She's running after him, and he literally like punches her in the
I know,
stomach.
yes.
And he takes the kid and gets into the car, and I was like, oh my God, is he like really going to get into an accident right now? And luckily, like, it didn't, escalate to that. But as fun as that movie was, that scene still, like, had me on the edge of my seat. It was so incredibly powerful and, like, heart-stopping. So I had to kind of highlight that before I passed it along to you.
I would say, there's been a lot of movies that they're super, like, fun-loving at first, and then they get super stressful. It's sort of like, what was the stripper movie that everybody was obsessed with back in the day? Magic Mike.
Yeah.
It has a moment like that where it's like, oh, let's have all this, like, fun-loving, oh, it's just sex appeal. And then it gets super stressful, like something like that. Right, like at the end, right in the middle, and I was like, were you like, oh yeah, we got to teach our audience like a lesson before this ends. It can't be all just wild shit happening.
Yeah. I mean,
But,
that's how it feels like. That's how it feels like with, say, Jojo Rabbit. And I say this because anyone who hasn't seen the movie just has seen the trailers, and they're like, oh, it's just some stupid comedy where some kid has Hitler as an imaginary friend. And I'm like, that is, first of all, the beginning of the movie, and that's how they frame the movie for the trailers. But you get into it, and it's like that second half of the movie is so serious and so, like, tragic and everything that I feel like they did all that just to get you into the theaters to teach you a lesson.
Right, like, probably to show, like, how, how people kind of fell into that in a way too. So it's just like, but golly, it's like, that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of stress. My heart hurts.
Yeah. But Wolf of Wall Street, I think, was a great movie to kind of just be absolutely insane. Leo, I feel like it was definitely one of his best performances just because I don't think we get to see him like that very often, and he really just, like, chewed the scene as much as possible. I love the one scene where Brad is supposed to be meeting up with Jonah Hill's character for the briefcase.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up. Yes.
Yes, go ahead, talk about it.
Oh, no, I just love that John Bernthal couldn't keep a straight face for that one scene when, what's his name again? It's, what's the other actor's name? Not John Bernthal.
Jonah Hill.
Yeah, Jonah Hill. Whenever he starts going off and, like, John Bernthal can't get a word in as Brad, and you can see him look away and hold his mouth because he's laughing, but he's just, like, trying to play it off as, like, oh, that unamused grin, like, oh, is this another effort serious kind of laugh. And Jonah Hill's just still going on. He just still, like, reaming him, and I think that's why he's such a good actor, is because Jonah Hill can just, like, go on. It makes me think of, what was it, Superbad that he was in?
Yeah.
And where he can just go off on these tangents. I'm like, you're just a very angry little man, aren't you?
And one more scene before we move on, but the real they were on Quaaludes quite often in this movie, but the one where they're on the phone with each other, and I guess Jonah Hill had messed up in some capacity, and Leo needs to, like, get there to him to fix things, but they're both so messed up on Quaaludes, and, like, Leo is just literally crawling because he cannot stand, and he gets in the car, and he's like, oh, somehow I made it there perfectly, but then you look and his car is like a freaking wreck because he did not get there. He did not get there in one piece.
I remember because I hadn't seen the movie, and when I was watching it with you, I stared at you and I went, how did he get home? How did he do that? And you're like, just wait, just watch.
Yeah, just
watch.
Just watch. Yeah, he did not, but yeah, that was a great movie, and you wouldn't have really thought that it was based on someone real, but it is. This guy completely existed, and it's just a wild ride. So yeah, Wolf of Wall Street is my number 9. Brittany, what is your number 8?
I think I'm going to have to go with, just looking at it, I'm going to go ahead and get it out of the way. Since we're on a Leonardo DiCaprio little spiel there, go with Titanic. One of the yeah, because I was like, man, I'll go ahead and throw this one out. I mean, obviously we know about the Titanic. It was supposed to be the largest ship, but apparently, it's one thing that the iceberg hit, right? But I think when I read, I think they only had like 20 lifeboats for that
well, it was
massive.
supposed to be unsinkable.
Well, yeah, it was supposed to be unsinkable. But, you think about it, what were the odds that it's like maiden voyage, the unsinkable ship, was like, it's almost like the fallacy of man, believing like, oh, we're unsinkable, and God rolls in one day and is like, you know what, I think they got a little big for their britches, what should we do? But I think what gets me the most about the event itself is that they sold it as unsinkable, which, interesting side note of that, I brought up the Titanic the other day to Aaron, and he said, oh, did you know that his either great-great-grandparents or something had tickets to actually go on the Titanic, but they ended up not going? And I was like, you almost didn't exist, buddy. You almost weren't around. And T.S. going, yes, it was so close.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to message you, but I'm glad we got that on there.
But, obviously the Jack and Rose romance is the made-up part, but the event is completely true. And I'll never forget, I always glazed over their romance because I didn't care as much about that. But the ending scene when the boat is going down, when the ship is going down, and there's that one scene where the old couple are too old and too trapped, and they just hold each other in bed as they die, gets me every time. Or you see the mother in the water that's frozen holding her infant. Like, the imagery is so powerful. And I was going to say, in Branson, Missouri, which is fairly close, they have a Titanic museum that when you go in, they give you a passport. And not like a real one, but like a I'm trying to think. They give you a passport, but it's of a real person, but, obviously a replication. But they give you a passport, and you learn about your person, about what age they were, if they were a child, were they first class, second class, third class. And you go through this whole museum, and they have water that is the exact temperature of what these people would have been dealing with. And you stick your hand in, and you see how long you can stand it. You can only stand it for like 10 seconds, Tia. Like, I have never touched water that was colder than that. And so as you go through, at the very, very end, not until the end, you learn if your passenger lived or died. And it's just like amazing, incredible. So whenever you hear about the Titanic, and it was such a big deal, and, we always grew up hearing about it, and then you see the movie and you kind of feel like you're in those shoes, it really hit home how tragic the Titanic really was, because it would be easy to be like, yeah, it was just a ship that went down. You know, people die all the time. But to see, like, that desperation and how few ships that they had, it was very, very heart-wrenching. I thought that was it kind of goes along with, not exactly, but you know how with tragic events like 9/11, and we know them and we hit them close, but sometimes seeing them represented in a movie where we feel like we're right there with these characters, or, you know, and at those times too, like real people, it really makes it hit home. It kind of punches you in the gut. So yes, Titanic, gonna be up there.
Yeah, Titanic is one of those movies that I've seen once because I'll never see it again. And that's not a bad thing. It's like they accomplished their goals with making a movie that was so intense, that was so just like powerful, that it's like, you can't watch it again. And I'll actually get into that later down the line, because I have a movie that's the same exact like feeling. Like, I've watched it once and it's like I'll never watch it again. But not because it's a bad thing, but because it was just so powerful. And I watched Titanic on VHS when you had to put in a second tape. There were two
that
VHS
was always like
tapes.
mind blowing.
There was two tapes, but yeah, that I when I watch things, I try and put myself in people's shoes, right? And
Yeah.
I just completely feel like mentally and emotionally exhausted because I try and put myself in their shoes, and I'm like, oh my God, that was like terrible. It's like you get on this boat and there is no really other choice. You are completely in like victim to the elements, right? And you have to sit there and think, like, I hate to say this, like, that was God at work or something, because unthinkable, as you said, on this maiden voyage. What the fuck? But
yeah, it was very like that's some hella timing, right?
Yeah, but it was beautifully shot. If you look into, like, say, how they filmed the Titanic, where most of it was like little sets that they just like threw water in, you know, they really did just a fantastic job with that, and transporting you into this world. And I thought that was really just a cool aspect of filmmaking. But what was I getting at with this? Yeah, I didn't mind the Jack and Rose like storyline. We obviously needed like people to follow, but you know, the big joke, you know, he could have fit up on that board. He could have fit up on that board.
There was room, Tia. There was room.
There was room. But you think about it, like, that scene was horrifying because, like, you know, she's just swimming through, like, dead, frozen bodies, just waiting. And people really did it. Like, can you imagine, like, talking to someone who was in that position and survived that? Like, that is a lifetime of trauma. And that's horrible. And then, you know, you mentioned the scenes of the old couple who held each other. Well, remember the band, you know, like playing the music
they went
as they
down.
went on. You know, and it's like so horrifying, you know, women and children first, and it's like not even the women and children really thrived. It's like, what the hell happened here? But it was really just a wonderful movie. It was heartbreaking, and I remember at that time, like, you know, the interest in the Titanic was really at its peak, because then they had like the underwater exploration of the real Titanic, which is still there to this day. I think I just saw something on like YouTube where they're like, we're going to go back to the Titanic. And I'm like, it's not decomposed yet, but I thought that, you know, what was really beautiful about that movie was the ending, when Rose finally passes away, and it's like she's finally back with Jack, and she's finally back in the Titanic, you know, like everyone was waiting for her pretty much. And it's just so like beautiful but tragic at the same time. I will say there's so back in the day I used to take ice skating lessons, right? And there is And there is a video recording of my grandfather taking me to the local ice skating rink. And they always played music, while there was ice skating sessions. And Celine Dion's Titanic song was playing. My grandpa's filming me. He's like, "Oh, you did such a good job, Tia." And I'm like, "Oh, the Titanic song is playing."
Oh, that's so cute. I was like, I wasn't expecting wholesome right now, but you know what? I'll take it.
There you go. But, yeah, I think that – sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say 2 scenes that I remember from the Titanic. Well, okay, one is a scene and the other is a random fact. The scene – remember, like, when it's showing the ship, though, and you do have, like, the underwater footage, but then the ship starts coming back to life? It gave me chills as a kid. Like, like
That's
when
what
it starts,
saying.
like, yes. Like, it was very reminiscent of, remember Phantom of the Opera, where it's like the dead, decaying theater and it starts coming back to life and you're like, holy shit. But I was going to say another random fact is when they found the Titanic, originally they were using that as an excuse to look for these 2 nuclear submarines. I think they were either Russian or something, and that they had to get the funding to find the Titanic. They said, the Navy was like, we want you to find this. And after they found the submarines, they were like, okay, now we can find the Titanic. So I just found that very interesting.
Holy shit. Fun facts before we move on. One is that the Titanic was not the only ship to crash horrifically. There were others, the Lusitania or something, and then there was another one. Yes, it's not Lithuania. It's like I know what you're talking about, the one that was taken down by the Germans in World War II. Yeah. So there was like other ones that also met horrific ends. And oh shit, I forgot what else I was going to say with this, but yeah, I don't know. The Titanic was just like, when you're talking about movies based on like real life stories, you have to mention the Titanic, just because it was a really fucking good movie that I'll never watch again. And that's nothing against the movie. It's just it did its job, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
I completely forgot what I was going to say because I had like one other like fun fact there in my pocket, and I'm like, now it's gone. So sorry everyone for that.
It's another cute story. I love cute stories.
I don't think so, but let's move on. The next one I'll put, I don't think you've seen this, Brittany, so I'll do my best to describe it, which I think I have in the past, but let's do this. So this is probably not as well known as others on this list, but I really enjoy this, particularly just because I enjoy Chris Evans' performance in it, and it is called Puncture. And it was based on a real life person and a real life court case. So Chris Evans plays this character, Mike Weiss, who is a lawyer. And, everyone knows Chris Evans now as Captain America, right? Wholesome Steve Rogers. But he plays an intense drug addict in this movie. And I don't know who was worse. I don't know who was worse, Chris Evans as Mike Weiss or Leonardo DiCaprio as Jordan Belfort. It's a competition, but so he plays this character who's like an extreme drug addict, but he's a lawyer on top of it, and he gets this case of this woman who, she was an ER nurse, right, and she was this homeless drug addict comes in who's going through a bit of a crazy spell, and she's trying to draw blood, and she sticks the needle in him, but because he lashes, it gets up and it sticks her, and then she is contracted with HIV. And But so she found out that apparently there was this thing where this company created these needles, these syringes that were pretty much like one-time uses because, to prevent that. The whole point was to prevent nurses and doctors from getting stuck. It's that you use it and immediately afterwards the needle retracts into the thing. And the hospital that she was in, and many hospitals were offered they were offered these syringes, but because they were like something like crazy, like 5 cents more than what they normally had, they decided to not purchase this. And so she was pretty much wanting to like sue because this was something that was completely avoidable. And so
now she's got to live with it.
She pretty much ends up dying because at the time it's like the 80s, and we really didn't have the medications.
Oh,
it quickly like turns to AIDS. But she hires Mike Weiss and his partner, and they are, trying to fight. And it's one of the things where it's like it should have just been a job because it's not something that they normally do. Like, and even Mike's, Chris Evans' character's partner is like, this isn't normally the cases that we take. But, like, for some reason, like, Mike Weiss just feels, like, so invested in this and so passionate about, like, bringing this to justice and shining light on how the hospitals are pretty much just putting their staff members at risk for just a few cents more, And all the while he's battling his own inner demons. I mean, he's, popping pills. He's living out of motels because his wife kicked him out. He's banging hookers. He's like shooting up heroin and everything, like so bad. He goes to like one meeting and his like nose starts bleeding, and the woman he's meeting with is just like, go clean yourself up. You're a fucking mess. But it's like and he just looks sickly, but through a whole movie, it's just him just wanting to make sure that this case doesn't get swept under the rug, and it's crazy because still to this day, if you read about it, obviously hospitals are still not using this syringe, even though it probably
could be. That is
why
I was about to think about that.
Yeah, and this was real, like, and they just decided never to go with it, and that really kind of sucks because it probably could have prevented so many other people in the medical field from getting infected with diseases. But I just think that Chris Evans plays such a compelling character. It's completely not something that you would expect him in because, again, we're so probably used to him playing Captain America, or if he plays a little bit of a jackass, it's like, oh, he's a playful jackass. But I don't think that people are used to seeing him in such a downtrodden way where he just literally plays like such a convincing, like person who's down on their luck mentally, emotionally, and even physically. And I
wasn't
really
just a pretty boy.
Yeah, exactly. And for that reason, I just really love Puncture because I think that movies like Puncture and Snowpiercer are some of his best movies that just get overlooked because of the Marvel Universe, which, don't get me wrong, I fucking love him as Captain America, but he is such a better actor than what you think he is. So, yeah, so Puncture is going to be my number 7.
I was going to say, on that note, you think about the medical professionals or, that have to deal with that, but you also think about the cops. I've been watching so much Live PD, and all the time if they're patting someone down, they go, do you have anything that's going to stick me? Because that's such a big concern for them, too.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about it, if those needles were more widely available and, drug addicts would have a harder time trying to reuse these needles that could possibly spread to other people because people that are addicted like that do not think rationally enough to, you get what I mean. It's interesting on all fronts that if the syringes were more widely available, but that movie sounds intense. That sounds like a movie that, how Tia knows that I have a thing that movies that will stress me out is very hard for me to watch. Like, Aaron's been wanting me to watch this movie about 9/11, and I keep refusing because I don't feel like sobbing and being an uncontrollable mess. But I feel like that movie, for as great as it sounds like a stressful ride. It's like, oh yeah, she gets AIDS, but also he's a drug addict, and I'm like, okay, that sounds so fun. That sounds like a happy movie, Tia. Very fun.
It's not a happy movie at all. Like, he goes through withdrawal. He, is like desperate to continue the case even after the woman dies. His partner doesn't want to pursue the case anymore because they're literally hemorrhaging money, and the partner has like a baby at home. And he's just like, Chris Evans' character is just spiraling. And I guess, spoiler alert, but he dies of an overdose at the end.
What the hell? Tia!
I did think it was interesting because at some point in the movie he starts using the syringes, and it's like, oh look, see, he's seen the first-hand benefits of using these.
Tia, you're dead to me.
But yeah, I'm sorry.
That's the most depressing shit. She's like, you want to hear something funny? You want to hear about a great movie? Yeah, I would love a great movie. This one's going to destroy your heart and soul and depress you incredibly. It's a great movie.
Because I love dramas and shit. I don't like stupid little, like, mindless, comedies, So to me, I'm like, I like freaking movies like this because it's so powerful. Like, if I wanted to see freaking, mindless comedies, I'd watch an Amy Schumer movie or something. But anyway, number 7 is Puncture. Let's move right along. Brittany, what is your number 6?
I was going to say really quick, I was going to tease you when you said, I love drama. I was like, no wonder you love Twitter. But I
oh, my God. And no wonder you like Twitch.
Oh, my God. No joke. But on mine, I'm going to go with The Imitation Game. It's a movie that we have both seen. One of the first movies I ever saw was Benedict Cumberbatch, about how M16, the intelligence agency, we have Alan Turing, who is brought in to crack Nazi codes, and basically the team going about it. But as we learn through the movie, he is in fact gay, and back then with the British, they were very it's wild. It's wild that being homosexual in England was considered illegal for the longest time, and that I'm trying to think of the words for it. In how even during that time, we think about how far we've come, that even if you did a great service, did a great thing, he cracked the Nazi codes that saved no telling how many lives because of what they were able to decipher, but ultimately he was found out for being homosexual and having to go through chemical castration that ultimately killed him through, I think it was depression, and with the mix of his health being bad from chemical castration, and how his only thing that was different about him was that, and it ruined his entire life no matter how much he gave back. But I think it was interesting getting to see it from the point of view, because you think back to World War II, I think I'm trying to remember that the exact, but like back then, we even think about concentration camps and POWs during that time, that yes, if you were Jewish and, others, if you were what they would consider, I'm trying to think, because gypsy is actually a derogative term. Romanians, I'm trying to remember what the other term is, but what they consider gypsies that were in prison in the concentration camps. But during that time, even after those were gotten rid of, people that were homosexual were either imprisoned or had something, like they went straight from having to deal with the POW camps and the concentration camps to straight to being either sent to prison, fined, all these other things for being homosexual. And you think, oh, well, that was just, Nazi Germany. And it's like, no, that was happening at England at this time. And it just is incredible to also think back and think about how far we've come with say, gay marriage being legalized, and how we look back now. I think I was saying the other day, and I'm like, can you believe that was ever, not something we could do, and that just now in the recent years we're making those kind of strides. But then you look back at those times, I think the movie itself is so incredibly touching, and you go through the movie and you're like, there's no way that they would do that to him. Like, he's so incredibly smart, he's doing all these things, and then to be treated that way, it really, for me especially, like, put it into perspective, because you hear about things but not being right there in that moment to witness what these people went through, and to actually see it and you go, oh my God, it's just, I don't know, it's pretty mind-blowing. So I think the movie did a great point of, like, hitting home, because, there may be some people out there that go, oh, they didn't have it so bad, and then you see that movie and you go, okay, yeah, like, it's definitely good for people to see, if that makes sense.
So, believe it or not, I've actually never seen The Imitation Game, even though I should. I know. It's just because, like, the story itself makes me so sad, because, as you said, it's like Benedict Cumberbatch, who is a phenomenal actor, playing someone like Alan Turing, who literally, like, helped end the fucking war, and it's like, no, you're gay, so you obviously need to get punished. And I'm like, he doesn't get, like, a get-out-of-jail-free card for pretty much, again.
Oh, I know, like, right?
And it's just absolutely, like, plain fucking ridiculous, that whole thing. And then the fact that they forced him to do chemical castration, like, what is this? And I think I remember it was actually something recently, I don't remember exactly what it is, right? But there was some controversy about chemical castration, like, still being a thing. And someone brought up, like, I forget what it was. Like, someone was trying to say, like, oh, they didn't punish gay people too hard or something like that. Some crazy crap, oh, that's not so bad or something. And someone was like, he literally died from it. People literally die from shit like that. And it's just, the whole thing just drives me nuts, because how I am with LGBT rights, that should just be a thing. And for you to, like, see that at some point it was literally treated like a crime, and again, against someone, like, it shouldn't have been a thing in the first place, right? But this wasn't just any normal civilian. This is someone who literally, like, aided in the end of, this horrific war, and you still decided that at the end of it he should be punished just because of who he has sex with. Just, like, what?
And what's crazy is people had two things real quick. The reason chemical castration is being brought up a lot now is because it got. I'm trying. Don't hold me to this. I'm just trying to remember. It got brought up recently because they were thinking about doing that for pedophiles. That even if they're released, to chemically castrate to deal with the problem, because a lot of pedophiles are repeat offenders, but I think that's why the conversation is being brought up again. But then you think back and you go, man, okay, what if you got falsely accused? I think it's pretty permanent for that sort of thing. And we think about how it affects health and mental, but then you think, oh, well, if they truly are that, then, yeah, that's why it's bringing up that conversation and why people are so back and forth on it. But I was going to say, on the Alan Turing thing with The Imitation Game, people were saying that what's big about when he cracked the Nazi code was that the public didn't know he did that, and it was very so hush-hush and so undercover that to the people that prosecuted him, he wasn't some hero. He wasn't, what he did wouldn't be really truly discovered until more recent times. But I think that, like, whoever was running this should have came in and been like, that dude's a hero. Don't, you know, like obviously it should have never been a thing in the first place, but to see it, you think somebody would have stepped in for him, but it made it very like, we used you and now we're throwing you away. We don't really care about you at this point. And I think that's what it was so dehumanizing, that to these people, it was like a lack of morality, that if you were homosexual, and I think that's just so wild when we think about, we would like to think a lot of the times that, you know, the British are more proper and more like understanding with those things, but I think it was a long time before it would even be considered not illegal, and I think that's just wild.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% correct. And I mean, there are still countries like Russia that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And many places, say, in the Middle East, where people who are homosexual are being thrown off of rooftops and everything. So it's one of those things where, yes, this happened, 60, 70, 80 years ago, but it's still prevalent to this day because gay people are still, you know, being treated like this, and it's just wrong. So I do want to see The Imitation Game, but it's one of those things, just like you, where like maybe you wouldn't see a movie like Puncture because of how intense it is. It's like, I know the outcome of what happens, and that just breaks my heart, and I don't think that I'm ready for that just yet. But I
was going to say, being gay became decriminalized in 1967 in the UK.
It's so crazy. And then, you know, for a long time it was considered a mental disease, and it's just like, people of the past.
I get you.
But I think that this movie absolutely deserves to be on this list. It got a lot of recognition, and I just think that Benedict Cumberbatch is a fantastic actor, so 100% I'm behind this. So I'm going to hit number 5, and I don't know if you've seen this movie either, Brittany, but it's a really good movie, and you should see it because it's definitely a lot more uplifting than the previous 2 that we've talked about. And the movie is called Lion. Have you seen Lion?
No. Like, I'll have to, like, look up a picture and see if it jogs my memory.
Okay. So, Lion, which stars Dev Patel, and who's just, like, a very, like, beautiful, gorgeous man, plays the real-life character Saru, who lives in India, right? And at the young age of 5, okay, it says 5. I'm like bringing it up just so that I'm like not butchering this, right? But so Saru at the young age of 5 gets lost, really like incredibly far away from his home one day, and doesn't get back to his home pretty much because he lives in a very rural and poverty-stricken area. He speaks a different dialect of Indian than others do. So when he gets lost, because he gets on a train pretty much, and he gets lost in that. So he can't communicate. He can't communicate with adults to try and be like, I need to get back, because they speak different dialects. And so they're pretty much like, what the hell is this young little child doing out here? And he's just like, I need to get back to my mom. But he doesn't even. And so because of that, they pretty much like take him, and I'm giving like the really shortened version here, but so pretty much they take him, they put him in an adoption center, and he gets adopted by these Australian parents. So then Saru goes to live in Australia. He lives with his family there. Nicole Kidman plays the adopted mother, and he pretty much just has a life there, right? He pretty much just has a life there, and pretty much like has forgotten about his childhood, and he has friends. He's an adult now. He's going to school, and he meets a girl, and he starts dating her, and she's just like, haven't you ever kind of like wondered? And he's just like, I barely remember anything. But she pushes him to try to find out. She's like, you have to be able to find out. We're like in the 21st century. You should be able to find out like where your mother lives and everything. And so so the movie's just pretty much him just trying to like find his mother and all of that, and trying to find what happened to him and all that. And there's just some like really like beautiful moments because he had like he loves his adopted parents, right? Like he loves Nicole Kidman. I forget like who plays the father, but he loves them. And he has like this really like moment where he's just like, to the mother, like his adopted mother, like, didn't you ever think like, because they ended up adopting like another Indian child who was displaced, and he's like, didn't you ever think like, that you're getting these kids with like, quote unquote baggage, and blah, blah. And she was like, you're my child, and I've never thought of you other than anything else. And he was always so scared to like tell her that he was like looking for his biological mother, because he didn't want her to ever think that like he was trying to like disregard her being his mother. But she's like 100% for it. Like, let's go find like your mother, pretty much. And at the end of the movie, he finds her. He goes back to the village that he grew up in, and like the whole village like remembers him. The mother remembers him. They have this really powerful, emotional like reunion. And then at the end of the movie, they show real life footage of the real Saru. Oh, and he does find out that like he was mispronouncing his name this whole time. But they show real life footage of the real Saru meeting his biological mother, and then his adopted mother, and his meeting his biological mother. It's just this like really.
Oh my God!
Like,
now I gotta look that up. I need a good cry. You know what? Sometimes you just need a good cry, Tia.
It's such a good cry. It was such an emotional like moment. Like the whole movie is really well done. Because it's like you have that, and on top of that, because Saru is like this well-behaved child, but when they adopt like the other child, there's obviously maybe like a little like something off about him, so things are a little bit more challenging with him, and then as they grow up, it's just this whole entire thing, and it's, it's emotional obviously, but it's really heartfelt, and it has this like really beautiful ending, and I loved it so much, and I was like, wow, I really like this guy, Dev Patel. I think that he needs to be in everything now. So Lion is going to be my number 5.
I was going to say what's wild is I feel like I can relate with this because, as I told you, it's like I have 2 cousins, and they were adopted from India because my aunt and uncle, they wanted to have children, and my uncle, my great uncle, which he's passed away now, but he had testicular cancer and he couldn't have children, so they adopted from India. And I remember, them talking about how it was just the absolute best day of their life, and getting to get them, which which I always thought they were related, but like which through adoption they are, but they came from 2 separate orphanages. And you think about, I've always wondered if they would want to try to find them, which they went to India before to like reconnect with with their heritage and everything. But and my great uncle, he ended up getting testicular cancer again and passing away. But you think about people that adopt, how badly they want these children in their lives. So thinking about, Nicole Kidman's character, adopting, I find it very sweet. You know what I mean? It's very touching at like a personal level for it, because I love my cousins, and you could only imagine what if they were in that situation where they simply just got separated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it really was just like an accident. Say, Saru and like his brother were on a train and they got lost. And you find out that the brother died that day, which really sucks. But it's just like one of those things, like a complete mistake, right? Like went off,
from
die? Shit. I think he just kind of got like stuck on the freaking train or something like that. He he was killed by a train, it said, that the same night that they were separated as children. So
that's wild. That's sad.
Yeah, so it's just like one of those things where he literally just got displaced, and because he couldn't, communicate properly with anyone else, he just gets like shifted into an adoption agency, and there's definitely that case of they didn't really even care to try to find his real, like family or something. It was just like, oh, here, we can put him in an orphanage and, adopt him out to some, rich white folks. For Nicole Kidman.
And you think about, like, the overpopulation issue in a lot of these countries. It's like how many children they must be getting through these orphanages and how many are being given up. It's like you wonder, does that lack of caring just lead into that because of, like, it's kind of like when you deal with DHS and they're just so mean to you and you're like, I haven't done anything. And then you go, well, how much have they dealt with that they're just now funneling through, which isn't a great excuse for a lack of empathy, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, and, and Nicole Kidman's character and her husband, they are just, just looking to have children because they can't have children. They're, middle-aged at this point, and they're like, all right, let's just, adopt a child and give them, hopefully a better life, because they're quite, like, well off, I believe. So it's like to them they're giving them. But it's a really endearing movie. Nicole Kidman is great in it. Dev Patel is great, and the ending is just a really sweet ending. So that's definitely my number 5. Brittany, what is your number 4?
I am going to go with, let me look at my list here to see which one I would like to have more, because I know we're going to be, I'm going to go with Zodiac. Because,
Ooh.
I know, I thought it was a big one. We know of the unsolved murder case of a serial killer called the Zodiac Killer that would send these cryptic messages to the news outlets and the police, basically, what's the word for it? Mocking them for not being able to get him. Because that's the thing we learn about serial killers, that once they stay on the loose long enough, it's like they almost want to be caught. They want that thrill of being like, oh, you'll never catch me. It's very cat and mouse. I can't remember. Was Zodiac before or after the first Iron Man? Because I'm trying to remember if Zodiac was where Robert Downey Jr. was starting to come back into the role, or if he got that role because of being an Iron Man. Because as we know, with Robert Downey Jr.'s past with drugs, it was very hard for him to get that second chance. And to just see him in his element was, as the detective, was very interesting. The whole movie itself, I love murder mysteries. And as you know, sometimes I get scared with scary movies, but this one was just so interesting about what we think back to these cases that take the media by storm, and this was before our time, I believe. I think because it was in the 80s, I think, or the 70s, which I think it was the 80s. And what what everything was going through and getting these messages and how it must have taken the media by storm. But you just see this desperation to catch this guy, which they never end up doing. And I think in a world where we're so used to movies having an answer to everything at the end and going, yeah, they never found him. They got very close, or they may have, but didn't have enough evidence, which it is interesting. I think there was one suspect that died, and ever since then there's been no more murders connected like that. You have to wonder, was that the guy? Was that the one that did it? Very much like Jack the Ripper type effect to it. And I think that's especially why it kind of took everything. But the movie itself is so well done. I love the era of it, the vibe of it, but also just to see how these characters are clamoring to kind of get answers and how they're not there. But I love Robert Downey Jr. He was great in it. He was very intense, but also kind of scary. I kind of remember I haven't seen the movie in so long. I kind of remember being slightly intimidated by him, but that might be just because he's so gorgeous that your brain's like does not compute. Have you seen Zodiac?
I've seen Zodiac. So it came out in 2007. The first Iron Man came out in 2008. So you have to think that he probably filmed these movies very close to each other. And I love that in Zodiac, literally the three main people have gone on to be in Marvel because Mark Ruffalo was also in it, as well as Jake Gyllenhaal. And they were all three of them like fantastic. I think probably Jake Gyllenhaal, as you would say, was probably the quote-unquote main character. And I watched it when I was going through my little bit of Jake Gyllenhaal, session back in the summer. But it was really well done. And I thought that it was really great seeing these actors together. As you said, Robert Downey Jr. was fantastic in it because his character went from not really caring about this whole thing to, we see how it kind of, wrecked him. He got so emotionally invested that he, lost his job. He was, living like a hobo. Mark Ruffalo's character is the cop who kind of is just I'm just doing my job and shit like that. He's invested, but clearly doesn't let it, overtake him. It affects Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr.'s character like nobody else. They obsess over it. And Mark Ruffalo is the one that kind of comes out of it more unscathed just because he's a little bit more professional, even though he also is getting really caught up with it. But I do remember before watching Zodiac, I was like, how did they make a movie? They never caught the Zodiac killer. And I do remember being a little, let down by – the movie as a whole was great, but the end I was a little let down with because there is no conclusion. It just kind of ends. But the murders did happen in the late 60s, early 70s. So the guys if they never caught him and it wasn't that one dude that they assumed that it was, the guy's probably dead at this point.
I was going to say, and by the way, I was re-looking. Robert Downey Jr. was Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. were the reporters, and Mark Ruffalo, and I always want to call him Mark Buffalo, but Mark Ruffalo was one of the investigators, and Anthony Edwards, I believe.
Yeah. And Mark Ruffalo was rocking that really great frickin' fro of his. So I appreciated it on that level.
This is Tia, and she approves of this message.
Mark Ruffalo is not a bad-looking guy, and he's a fantastic actor. He's going to be in some show where he literally plays murder twins or something, and I'm just I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
We love murder.
Jake Gyllenhaal always does a fantastic job of playing a completely unhinged individual, and Robert Downey Jr. is just pretty much doing Robert Downey Jr., and we love him every second for it. So I really have nothing bad at all to say about Zodiac except for the fact that, the ending was a little bit of a letdown, but I can get over that. I still think that Zodiac is probably one of the best movies in the crime drama, and it's just great seeing those three act together in that capacity.
No, I agree. It made me. I do want to see more Mark Ruffalo stuff, and I didn't think much about Jake Gyllenhaal when I was younger because I think we both know I had so much trouble getting into watching full-on movies that a lot of those movies that Jake Gyllenhaal is known for, I never actually watched. But
you clearly
with him.
I was going to say, you clearly were not a part of the Donnie Darko era because people my age in high school, ate that shit up. We were, quoting it and fucking shit. Jake Gyllenhaal was, a god to us.
Well, you were a goth, so, of course, that Donnie Darko and all that shit, that sounds like something right up your alley, Tia.
Exactly, but, I love that you put Zodiac down. I think that 100% deserves to be on this list. We are killing it right now. We got 3 more spots going on. So I'm going to hit the next one just for the sake of time. And it's going to be a movie because I like when we get like to breathe a little and talk about films. But I am going to do a movie that, you know, obviously has one of my favorite actors in it, and surprisingly has an actor that I always say I don't like, but my mom pointed out that some of my favorite movies have him in it, and I'm like, all right, I guess I have to kind of give you credit for that. So it's going to be Argo, and that obviously stars Ben Affleck. He directed this movie as well. Huh?
I was laughing because you had such a hate boner for Ben Affleck.
I know, but like I say that, like I'm like, oh, screw Ben Affleck, and my mom's like, all of your movies are Ben Affleck with it, and she's kind of right. Like I like Argo, The Accountant, frickin' there was one other movie that like if I think about it, it's like he was in, and I was like, shit, I hate that she's right.
Right. You're gonna learn your mom's always right.
I know. I just have to accept it at this point. But yeah, so Argo, actually, it won an Oscar, and it's so crazy because I didn't even like know about this shit happening. It's just so surreal to me that something like this was like a thing. But and I'm giving the bastardized version of it, you know, obviously. So at some point, there was a lot of unrest between America and Iran, and it got to the boiling point where Iranian students decided to pretty much take over the U.S. embassy. And during this riot, 6 Americans were able to escape. They obviously knew that their life was going to be really in danger, so they had to pretty much seek shelter elsewhere, and the Canadian embassy took them in. Now, while the Iranian students were taking over the American embassy, America's pretty much like, they're safe in a way because they're like hostages, so they have to like, you know, in order to not pretty much do a full-scale war, like the students kind of know that they can't like do anything to these hostages, so believe it or not, they're like the safest ones. But these 6 Americans are completely fucked because if they're found out, they're going to get killed, and the Canadian embassy is going to get, like, freaking killed. And at this point, the Canadian government doesn't want them there anymore because they're like, that's too much of a risk. So it's like, okay, how do we get these guys out? And they know that, like, the Americans just can't come in and, like, grab them out. It's just going to be, like, horrific. And they go through all these like scenarios of how to try to get these Americans out. And finally, Ben Affleck's character, who's pretty much like, this is his thing, is extraction. He comes up with this like crazy notion that he's like, we're going to pretend to be a Canadian film crew that is on set in Iran for this like sci-fi space movie. And the 6 Americans are all Canadian like film crew people. And it's so insane because it's like, it does, like, the CIA is like, that's never going to be possible. But it's like they find help with, like, real-life Hollywood people who, like, were actually given, like, medals at some point. Like, I think his name is John Chambers. He was, like, a real-life sci-fi movie, like, costume set designer. He's, like, credited he's credited with the one who, like, you know, came up with Spock's, like, pointy ears. And they get, like, him involved. And so it's, like, they're pretty much, like, it's a fake movie, but it has to look real. So we have to, like, really cast people. We have to really have, like, a script reading. We have to have publicity. We have to have a, like, production room and shit like that. So it's, like, they put together this movie Argo that they're, like, you know, promoting. But it's a completely fake movie. And they go there and they give the Americans, like, all their fake passports. They go through, like, you know, the whole spiel of what their cover stories are. And, of course, Scoot McNairy's in there. And he's just like, this sounds fucking crazy and is never going to work. And you want us to risk our lives for some crazy shit. And Ben Affleck's character is like, man, my whole specialty is extraction. Believe me, this is going to work. And at some point, you're like, it's not going to work. They get to the airport finally at some point, and, like, the Iranian soldiers, like, pull them aside, and you're like, it's never going to work. And Scoot McNairy's character, who was, like, the most skeptical, who seems like he couldn't retain any of his cover story, he just, like, comes out and, like, explains the whole plot of the fucking movie, like, completely convincing these Iranians. And then finally the Iranians are like, all right, well, we got to call the production company to see if it's even true, right? So John Goodman's in it, and he plays John Chambers, and his whole thing was that him and this other guy were supposed to wait by the phone, but they had been told by the CIA that it's going to be shut down, and they're like, well, let's just go for a drink before we shut everything down. So just as the Iranian soldiers like calling, it's like, oh my God, no one hear the phone, they're gonna know. And like just as the Iranian soldiers about to put the phone down, John Chambers like fucking comes running in and like grabs the phone. He's like, hello.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
So they finally like get on the plane, everything's happy, they were able to extract it, and it's one of those things where like the CIA had to deny it. They had to give all the credit to the Canadian government, which would, you know, this definitely helped. You know, that's like not saying that they didn't help. But the CIA couldn't, like, give any credit for it, and Ben Affleck's character, like, pretty much had, like, a silent, like, medal ceremony. And it wasn't until, like, I think not Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton or something. It wasn't until, like, freaking 10 or 20 years later that they were, like, finally were able to admit that, like, this was an operation that happened. So it was crazy. I found myself loving it. Like, I watched it, and I was like, all right, I'm just here for Scoot McNairy. And then I was like, I love this movie. Like, I found myself just, like, watching it, like, every day.
You're going to watch it again today. I'm already calling it.
I'm just saying, it's such a good movie. I was like, this movie is so great. I'm like, it feels, like, intense. It feels hopeful. It feels hopeless. I was like, there's so much crazy shit in it. I was like, I love this. The ending, you feel so validated. I was like, this movie is so great. And there's a line in it where, like, they're doing, like, the read-through, right, for the movie. And so all these reporters are trying to ask, like, the people involved, like, questions. And one of the guys who's, like, helping with John Chambers and Ben Affleck's character is like, the guy's like, so why is it called Argo? And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, you don't know why the movie is called Argo? He's like, no. And he's like, you know, but this is your movie. And he's like, yeah, so. And he's like, so why is it called Argo? And he's like, how about this? Argo, fuck yourself.
Oh, my gosh. I was going to say, your obsession with Scoot McNairy and these characters, or like these actors, are the reason you find so many good movies. You're like, I came for the Scoot, but I stayed for the Argo.
That's like, before I pass it to you, Kanan has started this thing every Friday called Film Suggestion Friday, and he's been asking me for, like, help in finding movies to suggest to people. So this week I suggested Sweet Virginia, and I think last week I suggested like Snowpiercer or something, and he's like, I'm seeing a trend here, and I was like, yes. I was like, my love for these actors have brought me to many good movies.
Right.
It's just what it
that
is.
Was but
anyway,
I watched so many times.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't hate on us. But so yeah, my number 3 is Argo. I know you haven't seen it, Brittany, but I haven't talked quite enough about it.
I'm about to say, I heard when the obsession started, but I think those movies that can make you hate, love these actors that you do not like. You know, we talk all the time about how there are, you know, bad directors that make good actors look bad, and we have to go, well, you know, it's not exactly their fault. You know, they just haven't been given a good script. But then there's times that you get a really great director where everybody's working together and it's so cohesive, and you have to, it makes you realize, like, hey, man, this is why it got all these, I think it got pretty highly awarded, didn't it? Like, isn't it pretty...
It won the Oscars that year. It's just so crazy. This movie is, like, completely, like, you know, based around true events. And it's like, how nuts is that? The CIA literally decided to, like, come up with a fake movie to, like, extract 6 Americans from Iran.
I know. Like, when I heard about it, back when it first came out, I thought it was all fiction. Like, I was like, well, that's interesting. But to actually know it was real, it's like, man, you think about how everything had to come together like exactly right for this to even happen. It's so crazy.
Yeah, and they show, like, in the movie, obviously, how tensions even started, like, what, even America's part in the whole thing was as well. Because, it wasn't, like, 100%, Iran. Like, America did what it does best and shove its nose into places that it shouldn't, and that was a huge cause of the events in this film. And I just think that, like, how it was done, the pacing was really good. It just felt like, you felt like what was at stake, and then you also felt like really good at some parts, especially like when they're putting together the fake movie, but then it continuously brought you back to the fact that, like, there's real lives at, risk here, and they very well could end up dying.
It's wild to me. Like, and it's not like to be like political or anything. It's just that it's interesting that the people that end up paying for like these feuds between governments and who gets pissed off it was the embassy, like, people that were there who probably, had nothing really to truly do with the affairs that were pissing people off so much, but they're the ones that get the brunt of it, that their lives are in danger for something they can't really change. And I always find that kind of interesting, that that's the people who made the most. Like, when we talk about, like, children getting hurt during wars, and you go, man, it really, it just sucks.
Well, I mean, it is always the innocence. And, they do show in the embassy, like, the Americans obviously were concerned with themselves, but there is a part where there were Iranian people who were applying for American citizenship, and, like Scoot and his whole crew knew that they need to get those people out as well. Because it's like, if
those people are going to be considered traitors.
Yeah, so we need to get they weren't just like thinking about themselves. They were thinking about, the others as well. So it was just crazy. Argo is probably one of the best, like, put together real life story movies, and I really love it. So that's my number 3. Brittany, what is your number 2?
Was it number 2? My number 2. Okay, I got confused. I was like, do I have another one after this? I had a blonde moment. You can forgive me. I'm going to go with the King's Speech, because...
Oh, that was on my list, too. I love this.
I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't my number 1, but go ahead.
Okay. As we know, it's like with Prince Albert, who he was second in line for the throne, I believe. This was around the time that they were entering World War II because of, I think if I remember correctly, the British minister at the time was very blindsided by Adolf Hitler believing, like, oh, we can just have a truce and be fine with each other, and how that they were about to lead into World War II. But the thing with Prince Albert is that he has a speech impediment. Like, he has trouble speaking in public. And as we know, it's like with these high officials and with royalty, they have to give these speeches. They have to, like, basically raise up their people and kind of bring them together through these speeches. And as we've seen with many conflicts and very many big events, like, okay, we have Martin Luther King Jr. and his I Have a Dream speech, or we have Abraham Lincoln giving his I'm trying to think of I'm getting my words confused, but basically having to go through and to have a leader that can't give a speech is very hard. And Prince Albert talks about how his brother made fun of him constantly, and his father was always telling them to give him a hard time about it to try to bring it out of him, but it was only making it worse, that his fear of speech, like, he tries to tell his children a story, and as we see, he starts taking these lessons, which I'm trying to remember his name, but he wasn't truly the speech therapist, but he was actually an Australian actor who, he was more of an actor than a speech therapist, but we find out he's not really even able to officially be trying to help someone like that. But the man explains that when all these people were coming back from World War I and they couldn't speak, and nobody was there to help him, he was the one to help these soldiers, and so he ends up helping the prince. And as we discover, his brother, who when their father passes away, he becomes the king, but he's in love with a American divorcee, I believe. I can't remember if she was American, but that was a big scandal at the time, that she was divorced and she was going to marry the king, and he ends up stepping down, and Prince Albert takes the throne. And we realize that he's about to have to tell everybody, hey, we're going to war with Germany. And having it, like, that speech was such a big one, like, to bring the people together and kind of quell their fear. And it was just so powerful. And I feel like, it's like I took speech therapy for years because I couldn't pronounce S's. So I imagine what it would have been like if I had much more of a fear to speak, and being put on the spot where you're supposed to lead these people and you can't even tell a story to your children, and how he freezes up. And it's just like, it's very encouraging. We watched it for my oral communication where I froze up on my first speech. Like, I completely froze, and I ended up crying afterwards, and I had to think about, like, and so to watch that movie afterwards and going, man, it was very inspiring. And to think of it being real, I don't know. I just think that movie is incredible.
The King's Speech is one of the best movies. I watched it and I was completely blown away with how well done it was, how, as you said, inspiring. Seeing Colin Firth, who plays the king, with his stutter, and how bad it was. And then seeing him going through the lessons with Geoffrey Rush's character, who I love their first interaction because, I forget what year it was, obviously before World War II, right before, but, the different type of medicine techniques, because Colin's character goes to a doctor, and the doctor's like, keep smoking. It helps open up the airways. And then as soon as he goes to Geoffrey Rush, he's like, what are you doing? And, like, pretty much smacks the thing out of his hand because he's like, that's just going to make your stutter worse. It's going to, like, make your freaking throat freeze up. He's like, what's wrong with you? But their relationship was so well done. Geoffrey Rush is such a phenomenal actor, as is Colin Firth. And then when you find out that so patient, and then once you find out the truth about Geoffrey Rush's character, but then him still helping him. And I love at the end of that movie when it's like, time for Colin Firth to make that speech. And doesn't he pretty much insist that Geoffrey Rush come with him? Because it's like they weren't going to let him in at first. Because they're like, who is this civilian? He's like, no. He comes with me, And it was like so... It's so well done, and I love that speech at the end. Like, it's so powerful because it's real-life events, and it was setting up for, a time that they're really going to have to get into, and that's something to tell a country that, we're about to go to war. It's certainly not anything that happens these days. It's just like, hey, we just sent troops there, blah, blah, blah. Like, we don't get those type of speeches anymore, but The King's Speech was really a phenomenal movie that absolutely deserves to be, like, this high up. I just had it on my list because of how phenomenal it was, and I'm glad that you put it because it wasn't going to be my number one. So, but it certainly deserves to be, like, within the top two because of how good it was. My grandmother has a friend who has a bad stutter. And they went to go see this movie, and my grandma was kind of like, are you going to be okay with this movie? Because, you have a bad stutter, and the main character has a bad stutter, but I think she found the movie like uplifting because you know, you had all these people who were making fun of him, but in the end it was the person who showed him the most encouragement and the most that was the person to help him, you know, achieve, you know, to be able to do this speech without stuttering.
Makes me want to rewatch it again.
It certainly does. No, it's been years since I've watched that movie, and I really would watch it again because it was so well done. And it was just, you know, it was like uplifting and just really inspiring. And I think that movie, on top of Quills, if anyone out there has seen Quills, that is some of Jeffrey Rush's best freaking work. I know we love him from the Pirates of the Caribbean movie as Captain Barbossa, but freaking The King's Speech and Quills is like some of the best acting from him. So phenomenal job with putting King's Speech on here. It's like I love you for this, Brittany. Like I feel like our friendship just unlocked an achievement knowing that way.
Yeah, did it just deepen?
Yes. But we are down to the number one of our top 10 movies based on real life. And I'm just going to go through the movies really quick. So we had Lawless, Wolf of Wall Street, Titanic, Puncture, The Imitation Game, Lion, Zodiac, Argo, The King's Speech. And before I get to number one, I want to throw out my honorable mentions now for some reason, just in case you don't have time. But 12 Years a Slave, 13 Hours, Legend, The Fighter, Ford versus Ferrari, Walk the Line, and Remember the Titans. Those are my honorable mentions.
Oh, those are some good ones.
Thank you. So my number one is going to be a movie that is similar to the Titanic in the sense that I will never watch it again. But that's how good it is.
I love the honesty here.
So the movie is The Pianist, and it was with Adrian Brody. And this movie absolutely, like, I thought to myself, I love movies that center around World War II. I've watched plenty of them. I enjoy that era of movie, making. And I went into it thinking that I'm just going to watch another movie based around World War II. And it completely just felt to me for a moment where it wasn't even a movie. It was like a window into this period that was horrific. And I found myself like not smiling at all during the movie and feeling completely just
not
like,
a happy movie.
Not a happy movie, just like, oh my God. So Adrian Brody plays this really talented pianist during Poland right as the Nazis invade and force them into ghettos, obviously kill a lot of fucking people during the Holocaust. And it's terrible, right? It's terrible because there's some moments in it where, and just like certain moments that really just had me like, oh my God. There's a moment where he's watching from his apartment across the street to this family having dinner. These Nazis come in and they say, you know, everyone stand up, and there's the grandpa who's in a wheelchair, and they're like, well, he can't stand up, and they just push him off the balcony like nothing. They just push him off the balcony because he couldn't stand, you know. Or there were times where Adrian Brody was like walking in a single file, and the Nazis would tell them to, and they would just shoot like 3 or 4 of them, and they'd be like, all right, the rest keep going. And you saw everything, how it deteriorated. It went at first from being like, okay, it's just an occupation, to them, you know, being thrown into the train. Like there was at some point where the Nazis told the Jewish people, like, okay, get all your shit together, like we're gonna go, and they're all like waiting online, and then they're being like tossed into these trains, and you know their suitcases are just pretty much being like thrown out. And this one Jewish guy who like they would make Jewish people be pretty much like officers to like help out. And this one guy like pulls Adrian Brody away, and he's like, what are you doing? I have to be with my family. And he's like, I'm saving your life, because those people obviously went to like the gas chambers and shit. So you see like the deterioration of the ghetto, and eventually it happens where like the Nazi, like no one's around, right? And at some point, Adrian Brody's literally just like hiding from these Nazis because they think they've killed everyone, and he's just like hiding. And at some point, he actually like kind of befriends one of the Nazis because one of the Nazis discovers him, but discovers that he can play the piano. So he's pretty much just like, you know, if you play for me, because I haven't heard music in so long, I'll bring you bread and everything. And he like gives Adrian Brody like a coat of his because it's getting cold and shit like that. And there's at the end, the Russians come in to pretty much like kick ass and take names. And so you're in this movie, right, the whole time. You're seeing Adrian Brody survive all this horrificness. And at the end of the movie, he like comes out, and the Russians go to shoot at him because he's wearing a Nazi coat.
Oh, you're like, no.
And you're like, oh my God, is this how it ends? And he's like, don't shoot, I'm Polish. And the Nazis, not the Nazis, the Russians are like, they could hear him, right? You know, his voice, obviously, and his accent. They're like, oh, okay. And the guy's like, well, why the fuck are you wearing that coat? And he's like, it was cold. And it's like, oh my God.
But why are you trying to destroy my heart before we're done with it? You're like, it's been a great podcast. You know what you need? A good dose of depression.
But so it was based on this real person, and apparently before I pass it along to you, they had captured the Nazi who had helped out Adrian Brody, and apparently Adrian Brody got lawyers and stuff because he tried to get that Nazi released. Just pretty much say, like, you know, he helped me, he was a good person, you know, he just was a Nazi because they forced people, you know, obviously some people who didn't want to be Nazis, but it never worked out. I think they like executed the guy and stuff like that. But yeah, so it was a very powerful movie, like extremely powerful. Adrian Brody like did the performance of a lifetime. I believe he won an Oscar for it. And I think this is why I believe that Adrian Brody, despite you not really seeing him in a whole lot lately, still is like one of my favorite actors of all time. He just did such a great job. This movie was so like, it was so real, and it was raw in the way that they told the story. And so I won't ever watch it again because there's no, say, like, entertainment value. I know that's...
This is just like when you want to just be sad type movie. Like when you just want to feel and you're feeling sad and you're like, you know what, let's be sadder. But
you watched it, and I was just like, oh, my God. I was like, it punched me in, like, the gut for a second where I was like, holy crap. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, it's actually interesting. I was thinking about this movie the other day because, you know, I work at the antique shop, and we have one booth where he sells a lot of World War II memorabilia because he just had, and I think I sold, because, and it's not for like, oh, people that buy that stuff are just being weird or anything, but it's for the interesting history of it. And I was looking, I had in my hand a World War II Nazi youth armband, right? And I was just staring at it because, like, it's just so crazy. You think back to the past and what this represented and what these people that thought, yeah, we're doing the right thing, and then you see what they did to these people, what they did to the Jewish community and the Romanians, and homosexual people, and what they did. It's just like, it was so powerful to see. Like, I think he had the guy had a World War II Japan flag and a Nazi flag, and you look at them and you go, man, these really were from that time period, and really what, you know, they were there. And it's just like, it really takes you back, and you think about, man, that movie I can't watch that movie too. I probably will never see that movie. It would hit too hard. I'm like, too real for me. That's why it's like my honorable mention, even though I haven't seen it, would be like Schindler's List.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But that's a good one too. But that really hits hard.
It hits hard, like, certainly. And I will say really quick, you know, It's one of those like real things. Like when I say like it has like no entertainment value because it's like, you know, you and I, Brittany and I, for all those who don't know, we met doing fan fiction. And I remember years ago I told you about the pianist, and you were, you know, thinking about, you know, story writing and stuff like that, you know, because you hadn't seen the movie. And I was like, I can't do this. I was like, because it doesn't feel like it should be something that's even, you know, written about, you know. And it's, to me, similar to, I don't know if you saw a few years ago, the project of, there was all these people going to, like, the Holocaust Museum in Germany and, like, posting selfies and, like, you know, standing up on
I heard about
things.
influencers going to, like, the concentration camps and the gas chambers, and yeah.
And so someone online, like, photoshopped it to, like, you know, where they're doing all these selfies and stuff, but it's in the middle of, like, people dying and stuff like that. So, like, let them know, like, you're doing all this, like, hooray fun stuff in where people were, like, horrifically killed, you know? And it's, like, that kind of somberness that I feel like the pianist, like, brings, you know? So, to me, like,
self with, like, their dying, like, grandma, and I'm like, why? Why do you feel like you have to, like, immortalize it like this? Like, there's a difference between, like, when people take a picture of, like, the last, like, embrace of, like, two elderly couples, like, to preserve, like, that love. But even that hurts. Even that's, like, does it have to be an image? Does it have to be, you know what I mean? It's like, what do you do? But at no point should you be, like, taking a selfie with, like, at a funeral, look at my dead grandma. Because never once, it's like, with my granny passing away, I didn't even really have my phone that entire, like, it with anything. And I couldn't imagine being like, hey, guys, at my granny's funeral and posting it on Facebook. I don't understand people.
Thank you, because I see that sometimes, and it's like, me, you know, my grandfather's in hospice, and he's dying, and he's hooked up to, like, life support, and they take a selfie, and I'm like, what? I'm like, what kind of sick?
Or, like, when they take a picture, like, oh, they're unplugging it, and I'm like, what? Why are you doing this? I just don't. It's like people have become so connected to social media that it's like not,
it's so
I don't know, it feels like a Black Mirror episode.
It's very much like a Black Mirror episode. Yeah, no, I don't agree with that at all. But yeah, did you have any? I know you mentioned the Schindler's List, but did you have any honorable mentions?
I'm trying to think. Let me look back at my list. I think I said the ones that I wanted to say. There was a few others that I remember that I thought would have been great for the list, but I hadn't personally seen them, but I knew that they were based on real events. But I can't think of them right now. No, right now for some reason though. Well, there's one that was about 9/11. I'm trying to remember the name of it. That I was like, I can't watch that. You know.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to remember what the other movie was. I'm sorry, I'm pulling a blank. I ever since that 6-hour drive yesterday, my brain is like, nope, I don't want to function anymore.
No, it's perfectly fine. Like, I won't ever watch a movie about 9/11. I freaking live in New York, okay? But,
yeah.
whatchamacallit, I really had wanted to put Ford versus Ferrari on the list just because I absolutely thought that freaking Christian Bale was 100% phenomenal. If this is like the top 11, he would have been on this list. So, I mean, I think that we freaking killed it. I think that we did some really fantastic movies that were based on real life events. I'm just
I think this was one of my favorites we've done.
I think so too. I think that we came out with some really great movies with some fantastic performances that, you know, because I think we did like a top 10 worst recently, and it's like, you know, let's get some positivity out here, even though most of these movies are sad as shit.
Positive? What?
Well, you know, when I say positive, I mean like us appreciating the movies as opposed to being like, this movie was crap.
This movie sucked ass. The whole.
That's naughty.
Oh my god.
I feel like out of these, I'm most likely probably to go back and watch like Zodiac because it's like it makes sense less emotionally invested in that than all the others, just because it's like the others will kill me. And
no,
for
I
some
agree.
reason,
I just saw the image you sent. I just saw that image. I see you, Tia. I see you, thirsty girl.
That's the show that Mark Ruffalo is going to be playing two people in. And I'm kind of like, that's a trend now. Really quick, it's like we had the show on Netflix with Paul Rudd, where Living with Yourself, where he played, two people. And then we had Legend, which was Tom Hardy playing both Reggie and Ronnie Cray. And it's like now we have Mark Ruffalo playing two people. And I'm like, it's just a trend where they're like, hey, you want to like do double the work? Like, to me, that's all it feels like. Like, no, you're not just playing one character. You're going to play two characters, and both of them are the main characters. So you're just... What?
I said I'd be like, pay me double if I'm playing two people's jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Like, pay me the freaking salary that you would have paid for a second actor. But yeah, Brittany, while we have about like 3 minutes left, please plug your shit and let everyone know where we can find you and what we can. Huh?
You said just the way you said that made me laugh. But you can always find me on Twitch at ittybittybrit. It would be twitch.tv/ittybittybrit. I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil lately. I didn't realize I would be such a fan of it. You can watch me scream, cry, like run away from a guy named Mr. X because X gonna give it to you. And you can follow me on Twitter at ittybittybrit0. It's a good way to see when I'm going live or if I have a schedule change. I normally stream Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. until whenever I decide to sleep because I am trash. But I normally don't do Tuesday because I have classes. But been really enjoying it. We have a great community. I really enjoy everybody being there. And we do have a saying that if you follow me, you're not allowed to leave. You're stuck with me forever. So before you make that decision, you need to think long and hard because I'll keep you forever.
Oh, my God. That's kind of like how I am with you with this podcast. You're never leaving. I don't care how big you get onto it. It's just, you know where your bread and butter is.
Right, exactly.
But, yeah, so please make sure that you check that out with Brittany. And as for the top 10, we record every single weekend. I want to say successfully, Brittany, that since I took over, about a year ago or so, we have never missed a weekend. So please make sure that you check. I'm very determined. But, yeah, make sure you please check out the top 10. Next week we'll probably be doing it on Saturday night because I'll be having my birthday party on Sunday. But make sure you check that out. You can find all of our amazing articles and podcasts on geekvibesnation.com. We do opinion pieces, movie reviews, TV show reviews, and highlights galore. Then, you can obviously find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We're everywhere pretty much. Just searching Geek Vibes Nation. We're there.
We're in a section.
Well, and now the podcasts are on YouTube, so you have no excuse. You have everywhere that you can find our podcast. And it's not just us at the top 10. It's the Geek Vibes Live, Geeks Against the Grain. We have They Called Us a Movie, Stranger Damies, Scene and Nerd, Cape and Castle. Just really fantastic people that anything that you're looking for, you can find a podcast to listen to. And just please make sure that you always like and subscribe. Until next time, I guess, Brittany, have a good day.
Y'all have a great day. Thank y'all.
See ya.